Good afternoon. I'm Tim O'Malley, CEO of Atima Media and Marketing. Welcome to the 20th Annual Hospitality and Tourism Summit and such a great presentation entitled How to Tackle Hybrid Events and the Virtual Divide. In true hybrid fashion, we're filming at the state-of-the-art AV Chicago studio at Chop Shop in Wicker Park while I'm in the office in River North. We're so grateful to film our hybrid educational sessions in this amazing studio. Cheers to AV Chicago for being our hybrid production sponsor, and I'm looking forward to seeing their presentation here today. We consider ourselves very fortunate to have some of the best in the business as partners. We couldn't produce this event without them. I'd like to thank our premier sponsors, Navy Pier, Skydeck Chicago, Fashion Outlets of Chicago, the shops at Northbridge, and Old Post Office. I'd like to thank our supporting sponsors, Live Art International, Safe Expo, and Selby Media. And I'd also like to thank our participating sponsors, Choose Chicago, National Concierge Association, Chicago Hotel Concierge Association, Spectra, Levy, Show Services, NHS, Balloons by Tommy, FedEx, Accurate Printing, Quest Events, and Expo. We're fortunate that we've had some great partnerships over the years, and as part of our 20th anniversary celebration for the Hospitality and Tourism Summit, we wanted to bring forward some of the stories of businesses that have participated in the summit. Check out this great story.
The redesign of Skydeck started about 5 years ago. We had a new ownership group come in and basically decide to create more here at Willis Tower for the guests to do. We created a world-class shopping, dining, entertainment emporium here called Catalog. This is a 300,000 square foot area that encourages folks to have a world-class meal before their Skydeck visit, after their visit. But by doing this, it really created an opportunity for us to put a first-class Chicago experience into the Skydeck. When the pandemic hit, it really created for everybody here in Chicago a sense of not just pause, it was just stop. It was basically a reset. It gave us the opportunity to take a look and say, okay, let's shift to a time-based ticketing instead of having a general ticketing. And then that helped our design. The design of the experience is set up not to put as many people as we can into it, but to regulate that, to get rid of the stanchions, to really make it an open field and let people take in part of what we did downstairs. So we wanted to focus on the origins of Chicago. We wanted to start out with how the city came to be. So you'll see throughout the experience, we've got a lot of different storytelling aspects. We have a few sentences that we'll outline. We didn't go overly in depth, but we didn't want to short it either. So come on in, guys. And we really wanted to focus on the tower. The opportunity to talk a little bit about the tower, but then digest it. How many Michael Jordans stacked on top? How many blue whales in weight? Instead of just sharing the tonnage, we really wanted to make it digestible for folks here. The whole goal is for Skydeck is to have people walk away with memories. The memories here can be romantic, they could be a fear of heights, it could be awe. I have participated in the Hospitality and Tourism Summit since inception. The Hospitality and Tourism Summit for us reinforces what we do on our own for the industry, for the concierge. We have a pretty robust plan that we put in place, but this is a really important part of it because we get to physically see everybody in one spot. Hospitality Tourism Summit will have great energy. It will really be an opportunity to reconnect. I anticipate walking out of the summit feeling better than what I came in at, and I'm typically in a pretty good mood. So I think this is all part of connecting, rebuilding together, and really driving that home.
That was a great story, and I love that the Hospitality and Tourism Summit is that helpful to them. I can't wait to be at Navy Pier for the 20th Annual Hospitality and Tourism Summit Trade Show on June 8th. We're so excited to get our industry back together, and we're going to do it safely. It's so important that we take this step together as an industry to show people that it's safe to visit Chicago and produce events and meetings here. It's time. Together, we can lead our industry back towards normalcy. Please spread the word. Let's show our strength. And it's going to be an outstanding day. We'll have over 75 exhibitors and 800 people, including the who's who of influencers in our industry. You'll see meeting and event planners, hotel concierge, guest services and salespeople, DMCs, social media influencers, industry leaders, and more. Not to mention some of Chicago's top tourism, group, and private event-oriented organizations. You'll also be able to sample some tasty food and some great cocktails. In addition to the virtual educational sessions, there are 4 other new items that I'd like to share with you. First, the event will be held in the Aon Grand Ballroom at Navy Pier and in 4 adjacent spaces for a total potential capacity of over 13,000 people. Since we're only expecting about 800 attendees, there will be plenty of space for social distance. Second, there will be strict COVID-19 safety measures. Our new event space has received a GMAC Star accreditation from the Global Biorisk Advisory Council, and we've partnered with Safe Expo to create and execute our overall safety plan. Rest assured, we'll all be masked up, there'll be temperature checks, and we'll be doing everything we can to keep everyone safe. Third, we'll be offering tours of Navy Pier. If you haven't seen their new offerings for events and visitors, you don't want to miss this. Finally, we'll be producing an entertainment showcase this year brought to you by Live Art International. If you're looking to find entertainers to book, or if you're like me and you just can't wait to see live entertainment, you need to come to this. You'll see one of Chicago's hottest bands, amazing magical performances, and a variety of Chicago's greatest talents, from blues to pop to classical. I personally cannot wait for this. It's just so important that we take this step together as an industry to show people that it's safe to get together again. It's time. That being said, I'm hoping that you can help us. Can you please make a point to pass the word to one person who should be there? This is the perfect opportunity to show people that Chicago is ready to host visitors and events again, and it would be great to show the strength of our industry. You can get more information on our website at hts.events or on Facebook and LinkedIn. Thank you. Okay, let's get on with the reason we're here. We've got a phenomenal presentation here entitled How to Tackle Hybrid Events and the Virtual Divide. I have the honor of introducing our partner, Andrew Brode, president of AV Chicago. For over 20 years, Andrew has worked in many facets of event production, television engineering, and software development in both nonprofit and corporate spaces. In 2014, along with his business partner, they acquired AV Chicago, a leading provider of technical production services throughout the country. Today, he leads a team of 40-plus production professionals that work with over 500 clients a year. He focuses on the financial, HR, marketing, and business development functions of the company. Andrew is an active member of AVIXA, MPI, and ALEA. Please welcome Andrew Brode. Andrew?
Thank you, Tim. As mentioned, I'm Andrew Brode. I'm one of the presidents of AV Chicago. We are a Chicago-based production company that works with clients on their meetings and events nationally. Many have asked us what we've been up to since COVID altered our industry last year. As I think about it, we've been up to a lot. At the start of the pandemic, we were charged with converting our clients' events to virtual ones and to do so quickly. The first one went live in April. From there, we've continued to hone our process for our future clients. While all that was going on, we also were in a need for a platform where we could host our clients' events. What we found with current existing hosting options, they were not appropriate for our clients. Many were overpriced and lacked the ability to brand and create a holistic experience for virtual attendees. We believe in a cohesive, uniformly branded experience. We believe branding should not just be limited to the live stream, but be any place that the attendee interacts with the event. To accomplish this, we focused our internal development efforts to this project, and by late May, we hosted our first event. Today, we're continuing to grow that platform with hybrid events in mind. We also knew we needed a place to host presenters outside of their kitchen tables and bedrooms. The product of that is the studios at Chop Shop, where I'm coming to you right now. In partnership with ESP Presents and the Chop Shop, This is our latest, and I'll say best studio design our team has put together with broadcast-grade equipment, lighting, and technology. This place has been a great asset to our clients' events of all sizes. It'll continue to be a great asset as we move into the hybrid environment. Most recently, we've been working on hybrid events, and we've been asking the question, how do we bring together remote and in-person attendees and presenters in a way that creates meaningful experiences? This brings me to today's topic, hybrid events and the virtual divide. As we move down the hybrid path, we are seeing what I'll call self-imposed limitations, like the feeling we have to favor one audience, whether it be the in-person or virtual, over the other. We are daunted by the idea of having audiences that have unique needs. So my goal today is to arm you with areas of consideration when you plan your next hybrid event. I'm going to challenge you to think differently about these events and not just succumb to the need of one type of event. We will put our focus on the venue, the platform, and other AV considerations. We are going to take an event and look at it through three lenses. One, the traditional, if there's such a thing, in-person event. Two, the virtual event. And three, what a hybrid event looks like. I'm going to spend less time on the in-person event because I think most of us have experiences with them. There are so many different types of events, so I'm going to frame our conversation by looking at one kind of event. Let's say, for instance, this is a yearly national sales team meeting for 250 people. Let's say that the attendees are located across the country and would normally all come to the great city of Chicago for their event. As we look at this event, we will start with the site selection process, and we will modify that to actually say the site and platform selection. So, as with any event, the first thing that we want to think about is site selection. And as I mentioned, site selection is also platform selection. So one of the key things that we'd always do is a site survey. And I want to take a moment at the start right now to say how important it is to bring your AV provider into the site selection process. So normally we would look at the size of the venue and say we need to fit 250 people, if we use our example, people in this space, say around rounds. In the virtual world, we would just need capacity of 250 people for the virtual platform. But in a hybrid world, I think we need to think a little bit differently about that. If we were to say we know that 125 people were going to be in person and another 125 people were going to be virtual, we could say, well, we need seating for 125 and capacity on the platform for 125. But if we think about that for a second, there could be a problem with that. Say a attendee who is planning on being in person tests positive for COVID, or maybe they just have the flu or something else that prevents them from coming. We need to make sure we can grow the virtual capacity to handle this, as well as we need to be able to do the opposite. Maybe somebody that didn't think they could make it to the virtual that can now make it to the in-person. We need to make sure we have additional space for them. So now we have a little bit more of a teeter-totter we need to consider in this. The next big consideration, which again I go back to why we want to engage our AV provider very early, is internet. As we know, internet on the in-person event was really just so people could connect their devices. Maybe the AV crew was using that to download presentations. So it wasn't as mission critical, I'll call it. In the virtual world, it was the event. It was how the signals got in from remote presenters into the control room, how the control room got out to the streaming platform, and how the streaming platform got to the attendee. So crucially important. To add a new dynamic in the hybrid world is we're now going to be in a venue where the internet is going to be as important as ever, but now we have all of the attendees' devices that we were used to having before. So we need to take time and think about that. And before venue selection commences, we need to really get an idea of what our program is going to look like and what our IT needs are going to be. So as you work with your AV provider, they're going to be asking questions like, what is the bandwidth available at your facility? Can I have dedicated bandwidth? And by dedicated, I mean bandwidth that is only going to go to the streaming and AV company that cannot change. All the remainder will be for people's devices. This is so important for consistency and strong internet, again, because our event is reliant on it. And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about it because it is that important. So time of day used to always be a good consideration when we were going to a site survey. We wanted to make sure we knew what the venue was like at the time that our meeting was going to be. So especially if there was windows or outside lighting, we wanted to make sure that we knew how much light was going to come in and what considerations we needed to make for that. Well, in the virtual world, we had the same thing. We wanted to be able to look at a presenter's space, maybe it's their office or their home, and look and say, what does the lighting look like? What other elements can impact what the presenter is going to look like? Many times we would do a rehearsal with a presenter in the morning, and then by late afternoon when their presentation was, the whole room would look different. In a hybrid world, it's the same again, but now we have both to consider. We have the venue, we need to look at that, as well as we need to look at the remote presenters, if there's one or multiple, what their space looks like going into it. So really the site selection process is not only where the in-person attendees are going to be, but also any place a remote presenter may be. Moving on, one of the other things that we were used to in all events was some sort of registration. And maybe in the figurative meeting that we're talking about right now, those 250 people maybe just received an email from a manager. But let's say they went to a registration site. Very easy, they put in their name, maybe their email and said, yes, I'll be there, no, I will not. Maybe there were some other sessions that they could select in there. That was it, they walk away. The next time they were interacting with anything related to that is when they pick up their badge in person. In the virtual world, the platform was everything. This is exactly where everybody interacted with the event. So now, registration became a process where not only were you saying you were going to be there, maybe selecting breakout sessions, but you were also getting a username and login and other information as to where you'll interact with the event. In a hybrid world, we actually want all attendees to have that same user account information because that platform is available now to both the virtual attendees and the in-person attendees, as we'll see in a minute. For the in-person attendees, we still need traditional badges so we know who is supposed to be at the event. This, along with analytics from our online users, our virtual users, gives us a lot of information as to how people are viewing their event. And that's definitely something you should talk to your platform provider as you plan. So after registration, our next thing we go to talk about is the platform where we're hosting the event. A lot has changed in that. In an in-person event, the event platform I guess we could consider was the registration site. And that's really where it ended. In the virtual world, the event platform was everything and had a lot of great tools in it that we can continue to leverage in the hybrid. Not only can we do registration in there, like we could both in the virtual world, we can also use that same registration for in-person. We can use this as a place to do surveys. We were able to do that same on many registration platforms where we could survey our attendees after the event. In a virtual environment, we were also using it for breakout rooms. We were putting agenda information in there, bios about the presenters. If it was a social or nonprofit type event, that's also where we may integrate the giving platform where people can make donations. All those tools are still available to us in the hybrid environment. For the virtual attendees, they're going to find their breakout rooms there. That's where they'll still be able to see who's presenting and what the agenda is for the event. Other things that we actually gain value to from having a platform that's available to the hybrid attendee is things like conference updates and other information, maybe presentation resources. How many times in an in-person event has somebody said, will that presentation be available for me after? And now it's as easy as saying, yes, go to the conference portal. So we gain that now as part of just thinking about the virtual attendee as well as the in-person attendee. After the event, we have our content archives. It used to be if in an in-person event, if we had any content after, maybe we threw a camera up in the back of the room, maybe that got edited, there wasn't really a place to put it. Now, because we have this virtual conference platform, we can take all that content, archive it, and put it up on that website so people can view after the event. Maybe they want to go back and learn something that it was breezed over and they wanted to take some time to watch it again. That is all one of the benefits of coming out of virtual into a hybrid environment. We already have a lot of those resources available to us. One of the other things the platform has done for us too is engagement, a really important thing. So when we were doing in-person events, Q&A and polling and chat and some of these other tools were often limited by price and were excluded from many projects. In a virtual environment, we had to have them. We had to have a way for people to chat and communicate. We had to have a way to get feedback from our presenters and get Q&A. So one of the things that's interesting about Q&A as I think about it is the best Q&A that we used to have was a microphone in the middle of the room or a catch box that we would pass around so people could ask questions. An actual recent study showed that 42% of people walked away from an in-person meeting feeling like their voice wasn't heard. The virtual world has changed all that now. No longer do we have to have people that feel comfortable being in front of a crowd get up to a microphone to ask a question of the presenter. Because we have these platforms where Q&A and polling and chat are already in there, an in-person attendee can also leverage those same tools. They can also chat to a virtual attendee and a virtual attendee to an in-person event attendee and be able to get feedback and communicate. Those engagement tools now are not a luxury, they're available to us and something that many attendees are going to come to expect. So we talked a lot about platform and even the virtual attendee in that, but now we also want to talk about general AV considerations of the venue. So a few of those that we've always thought about, power, right? We know we need power. It's one of the questions that when we book a venue, we're talking about, what access to it do we have? What is the cost of that? In a virtual world, I don't think anybody talked about power at all. It wasn't being billed for, and it wasn't as much of a concern. The biggest concern we had was wherever your control room was, had backup battery, and was able to stay on even if a power outage occurred. In the in-person hybrid version of an event, power is still important, right? We still need to light the set, we still need to be able to run the technology, but we are more reliant on computer-based technology now, especially when it comes to the stream. So we want to ask the question, what kind of power is in the venue, but we also want to talk to our AV provider and say, what is your backup power? Do you have backup power that can power your critical systems even if the facility goes down? Because this is important. We have a whole section of the audience that is virtual and may not know what's going on. So we want to make sure we still have a way to at least put up a message saying there is a technical issue and they'll be back, and we'll be right back. Internet. You knew I was coming back to it. In an in-person event, it was expected. Everybody had their devices. They needed to connect to the internet. In the virtual world, the internet was important to connect to it, but often as event planners, that was really not in our purview. Maybe we were working through technical issues with people that were having their own internet issues. For the control room or your AV provider's internet, it was everything. This was the connection to get out to the world, to get out to your attendees. As we look at a hybrid environment, internet is everything. As I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that the internet at the facility has backup options in it, that we can dedicate bandwidth. One of the great questions I always like to ask a venue is, do you have in-house IT support? So when the event in the evening occurs and the internet goes out, who do I contact? Do they have to contact a third party and that could delay the event? So these are crucial questions. Also, your AV provider should be providing a backup internet solution on their systems just in case there is an outage on that internet. A lot of those exist. They're commercial grade options that work over cellular. So definitely a question you want to take because internet is everything in what we do. Other considerations like a tech table. Well, in the in-person event, usually a 6-foot, maybe a 12-foot table in the back of the room was fine. Virtual world wasn't really a consideration. There was already tables in the control room wherever they were running the event from, or maybe in the cloud if it was a cloud-based software. In a hybrid event, this is actually more important because we're likely going to have more people and more equipment that we need to position, but also we got to think about COVID protocols as well too. So that may mean more tables further spread apart. And earlier when we're thinking about site selection process, we need to make sure we factor that in because we don't want an AV crew all on top of each other, especially as we have more. And that's just normal COVID health and safety. One of the questions I hear a lot about is control. How many people do I need in a hybrid? Well, I'm not going to go through that on the video and audio side for an in-person event because I think many of you are used to what the needs are for that. The question goes to, if I'm doing a hybrid event, how many people do I need? Well, you're not going to want to hear this. It depends. For larger scale productions, you're going to need a lot of duplicate positions. One person focusing on in-person and one person focusing on virtual. There are going to be a lot of opportunities where one person cannot handle the demands of both the in-room and the virtual. What also creates risk with that is if I'm in the room and I'm running audio and there's a problem with audio in the room, all of my attention is going to go to the people in the room. Why? Because they're right here in front of me. If I am running audio specifically for the virtual audience, my attention can be there. So this is crucial. This isn't just an annoyance and additional cost. This is going to be important to assuring that the remote attendee is being taken care of this. So that goes for both the video and the audio control. So one of the questions you should ask as you start working with your AV provider is understand those positions, understand roles, so you understand why this additional labor is being added. Presenter audio is one thing that is often asked. There's a term called IFB that you may hear. IFB is something that if you were only working on in-person events, you weren't used to. IFB is what I'm putting in my ear right now. This is an audio monitor coming back that the audio department is feeding to me. Traditionally, we'd have a floor monitor like this that would be used for me to hear videos and other clips that are being played. In a virtual environment, this IFB or this ear set I'm wearing allows me to hear everything, allows me to hear the presenters, and that way it doesn't interfere with the microphone. As we work in a hybrid environment, this piece is still going to be required. You're still going to have presenters in a hybrid environment that are presenting to an in-person crowd, but also listening to a virtual crowd. So understand that that's going to be a new tool that will be added. If you haven't been doing virtual, you may not be experienced with it quite yet. Video playout's another area that actually we do not need to duplicate. Video playout, if we're playing a pre-recorded video, and in person we had somebody that was playing Go on a playback machine. In a hybrid world, that same person will be there, except their signal can be split to both the in-person as well as the virtual attendee. Same goes for slide presentation. We don't need to duplicate these positions. Cameras, 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 cameras. For the virtual attendee, this is their lifeline, right? This is exactly how they see the room and how they are able to interact with or see what's going on in the event. So in the camera environment, we are likely going to see additional cameras needed for the event. So another camera option that's out there is a jib. As you can see in this studio, we have one here. In an in-person event, we rarely saw these deployed. There is additional cost because there is an additional operator and equipment. In the virtual world, especially when in a studio, became crucially important to help create context and movement in a shot. Cutting between static cameras really gets boring and it doesn't create a full atmosphere of the room that we're coming from. In a hybrid environment, deploying a jib in those locations is also a great idea, again, to help immerse the virtual attendee in the room. So I've mentioned how important internet is. The next most important thing I would say is lighting. So when we were in an in-person environment prior to a virtual environment, a stage wash is all we needed. We wanted a way to focus the attendees' attention to what's going on stage. Now, in the virtual environment, lighting is most important. And there's two things to look at for lighting. Number one, the lighting of remote attendees and presenters. Remote presenters, you need to take time in a rehearsal environment to make sure that the lighting of the room that they're in looks good, it's even, and it's consistent. We encourage you, if budget allows, to send at-home kits that have good equipment in them with good lighting that can help make a remote presenter look good when coming from their home. In the in the hybrid environment, like where we are today, I want to take a moment and show you just how important this comes. So the team is going to bring down all the lights with the exception of the stage wash. So as they bring that down, you will see this is what it looks like on camera. To those who are in person, I look well lit, the attention is on the stage. But if you're watching this virtually, it's hard to see me, it's darker, and it gets lost. So this is why it's so important to have good television lighting. So now the team's going to bring back up the lighting that was added, and now you can see how much clearer it looks on camera. This is why lighting is one thing you do not want to cut from the budget. It is going to be an additional cost with it, but it is going to be important so that the virtual attendee has the best quality video. So the next area I want to talk about is general session presenters. And in an in-person world, we had presenters would all be in the room presenting to the audience, which was great. Very rarely, we may have a presenter pre-recorded, but never did we have remote presenters in other locations. So in a virtual environment, everybody was virtual. Even if you were coming from a studio, you were virtually going into the presentation. But in a hybrid event, we actually have a great opportunity to allow presenters to present remotely. Why would you want to do this? Well, there are times when maybe travel plans change and they're not able to make it. Again, unfortunately, maybe something with COVID prevents them from leaving their home. They can still be part of your conference. To demonstrate how that may look, I've actually asked AV Chicago's General Manager, Amanda Boyer, to join us on stage here. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Andrew.
So we've used a kind of a different way of going about it. We put a monitor on stage, so I have someone to address. I can actually see Amanda. We talked a little bit about the use of an IFB or an in-ear monitor that I have in my ear right now. And as Amanda's talking, I'm hearing just her. I'm hearing her with good quality. This is important because I don't want to be distracted by other noises that I'm hearing in the room. So Amanda, you can hear me well, I hope.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you great.
So talk a little bit about, you're the remote presenter in our mock demonstration here. Tell us a little bit about what you're witnessing, what it feels like to talk to an in-person presenter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure many of us have become quite accustomed to presenting or meeting and talking in a virtual environment. But what we all are looking forward to is when we're back in person. But as Andrew and team are demonstrating today, I might not be able to be there in person, but still want to make sure that I'm able to communicate, connect, and be a part of this awesome demonstration. So what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is great audio quality from Andrew. If there is questions from the audience that are coming through from a mic, I'm able to hear them clearly. I'm also able to see the audience. I'm able to see Andrew. I'm able to see the set. So it feels like while I'm maybe 1,000 miles away, I'm still able to be here and part of the experience. So it's the best of both worlds when I can't be there in person.
So this is, again, one of the great things that came out of a virtual world. We're used to seeing people in remote locations interfacing with people also in remote locations. Now we have people in remote locations that are actually in the event, in the venue that we're located. So thanks again, Amanda, for coming by, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone in the audience.
So as we just did with Amanda here, this was a great opportunity to be able to work with a remote presenter. The most important thing we can recommend with anything is rehearsals. So let's back up a second and think about how we used to handle rehearsals in an in-person. A lot of times it was quickly put a microphone on and get up on stage. Maybe the presentation was submitted early, a lot of times right before they went on, but we kind of got into a rhythm where a lot of times we were skipping in-person rehearsals. And while that worked, it does not anymore, especially in a hybrid environment. When it came to the virtual world, rehearsals were the most important. We had so many different layers that we were not able to control, especially from an AV perspective. We had people connecting over internet that we didn't control, on a computer that we didn't control, going over an internet we didn't control. And there was a lot of opportunity when we could have signal issues. So having time to rehearse with that presenter beforehand is super important. So as we've gotten into that cadence, in the hybrid environment, it's just as important we do the same thing. The demonstration Amanda and I just did a moment ago will not flow properly if we have not had time to practice that back and forth. It is not something we're naturally used to doing. So doing those rehearsals is important. It is also important for rehearsals for people that are being introed onto the stage from a virtual presenter or vice versa. So we need to understand we've created a new dynamic that is not hard to learn, but definitely needs to be practiced. So rehearsals, even more important than ever, anytime there's a virtual presenter. Pre-recorded content's another thing that in a in-person pre-COVID event, we were not used to fully doing. Maybe the CEO would do a quick hello because they couldn't make it in, or maybe there was an impact video to kick off the event. In the virtual world, we had entire events that were totally pre-recorded, and played out live. Now, in the in-person hybrid environment, we don't want to rely too much on that recorded content, because if we're just going to play recorded content out to a room, that's effectively our attendees are here to watch a movie, and that's not really giving them the reason to want to come. So in a hybrid environment, we're going to lessen our dependency on pre-recorded content and focus more on in-person or virtual presenters speaking to the room. So that is one area where we'll actually do less of in the virtual world. So another area that we also get a lot of questions about is, how do I advance slides? Well, in the in-person world, we were used to using a slide advancer, right? I would be up on stage, I could advance my slides, very simple. In a virtual world, we actually had users use their phone to use a virtual slide advancer. So the PowerPoint machine or whatever's playing the content was in the control room. The presenter was hundreds of miles away, and they would use their phone to advance the slides. In a hybrid model, we can still use both tools. In-person presenters will use the normal one that we're used to. The virtual will use the tool that we deployed for them. So there is no change for that. Another big question we get in the studio all the time is, where do I look? In an in-person event, it's very easy, right? We want to survey the room. We want to talk to everybody that's in the room. In a virtual room, we want to focus on the camera because that's where our attendees are. In a hybrid world, we actually have to think about both. We want to address and make the people in person feel engaged, as well as we also want for the people that are virtual. So striking a balance between that is very important. As looking into any camera and has become accustomed to the virtual event is the teleprompter. When we were in person, we would use a teleprompter from time to time, but it was not a mainstay like it is in the virtual world. When we move back to a hybrid world, we need to be careful on our reliance on that. Because if I'm going to be talking to or reading off a teleprompter the entire time, I'm not addressing my audience. And that's one of those places where we've pulled too far in one direction. So teleprompters still have their place, but they should not be the central way for a presenter to give their presentation in a hybrid event. The next thing is presentation notes. When we were in an in-person event, we got used to having a DSM, a downstage monitor, where PowerPoint notes or other presentation notes could be brought. As I'm presenting, I can glance down, get new points, and look around. In a virtual environment, if I'm coming from my home, the feed that's coming back from the control room can have my presentation notes. In a studio environment, but in all virtual like I have right now, I have my notes up there and far away that I can see. We brought it up off the floor and put it in front of the camera. In a hybrid model, we're most likely going to go back to a downstage monitor for notes because we can more naturally address the audience, address the virtual attendee, and still see our notes. And this way, having a big monitor in the back of the room, not everybody in all attendees can see all my notes. So that's one way that we'll be adapting and changing as we move into a hybrid environment. We'll also be able to deploy our question and answer and polling tools like we prior talked about as a great way to allow interaction between the virtual and the in-person attendees. So as we move into the content of a virtual event, there's a couple things we want to think about. One thing that, one way I look at it and I work with our clients with is, what is the event? A live event, as we used to, is people in the room, and I don't think I need to redefine what that is. When we were doing virtual events, it's kind of like a TV show, right? But with no audience. It's being in a studio like we are right now with cameras. The only people in here are technicians and other camera operators. But when we look at the hybrid, there's two different ways to think about it. If we have an event that has more people in person and smaller amount of people that are virtual, it's kind of like a sporting event. So if you go see the Cubs play, which you wouldn't want to see the Sox, you'd want to see the Cubs anyways, you have 40,000 people in there, and then you have a smaller portion that are remote that are watching it over television. We're interacting with those two audiences different, but we really put a lot of focus on the in-person. The alternative to that is talk shows, right? We still have a small number of people in person and more people out virtually. Thinking about it this way can help us address how we put the event together and how we structure it. And this includes things like walk-ons and walk-offs. How much time do we really have to bring people in without losing a virtual audience? Graphics is another point. We always had graphics in a in-person environment, but a lot of times it was limited to a PowerPoint slide, and that's it. The other opportunities that started to exist in the virtual world is that we could now start doing lower thirds, we started doing half-screen graphics, and we had more options for animations. This made the virtual attendee and the virtual experience a lot more dynamic. When we go back to a hybrid, we need to continue that. That's still important that we have that high level of production graphic quality, and that doesn't just benefit the virtual attendee, it also benefits the in-person attendee. So we need to think about that. We want to create that, we want to keep that creative budget in our event so we have that experience for both attendees. Editing was something that we're all used to. In the virtual world, in the in-person event, we did not need that as much. With the virtual events, and most likely going into hybrid events, we're going to still need a level of pre-produced content in the event. So these may be opening videos that are just for the virtual presentation, and that will be part of an additional budget line item. Duration, this is a huge one. The way we structure an event is important. In an in-person event, it was okay to watch me walk on and off the stage, and there was a little bit more time. You could have a little bit more transition time. In a virtual event, it was, if you did not keep your segments tight and flowing, you often found yourself with awkward gaps in there. So as we move to the hybrid world, we need to be a little bit more we need to think through a little bit quickly. We need to think more clearly as to how do we get people on and off the set. So we want to make sure we take the time to do that. The next big area that comes with any event is breakouts. So like we talked about in our mock event here, we had 250 people. So we may, if we were doing an in-person event, we may do an A track and a B track, do 5 rooms with 50 people per room. Very easy, people would select which track they want, maybe they were pre-assigned, and they'd go into that room. In a virtual world, it was identical. We still had 5 rooms, we still had 50 people per room, and we had presenters, and we had an A track and a B track. In the virtual world, we need to think, or in the hybrid world, we need to think a little bit differently about that. We still need to be able to accommodate the people that are in person and the people that are remote. We need to be sure not to think, well, we'll just put a camera in the back of an in-person breakout room, record it, and stream it out. What will happen there is a presenter will be presenting, and they'll often forget about the virtual audience, and they will not engage them. So now we've alienated that part of the attendee base. So a good structure for this is to create 2 tracks like we talked about before, but a presenter will present to first an in-person crowd and then also to a virtual crowd at separate times. We'll actually still need room in the venue for them to be in where they can walk over, and we can call it a virtual breakout room. Your AV provider can set up good cameras, good lighting, good audio, and that presenter can focus purely on the remote or virtual attendee. So this is one of those areas where we're using the same things we were doing in the virtual world, same things we were using in the in-person. We're just structuring things a little differently. So as you can see with breakouts, we took the same thing we were doing in person, the things that we were doing in virtual, and brought them together in true hybrid fashion. So these are just one of the ways we're going to think about the same things, but we're just going to just order them a little bit differently. So virtual events have been exciting. In person, we're always, and hybrid should be just as exciting. We have come a long way to virtual events over the last year. We understand that to hold attendees' attention, we cannot just put a camera in the back of the room and walk away. We need to keep the event moving, have quality graphics and visuals, and we need to keep a high level of production quality. We will bring those same items over to the hybrid world if we want to be successful in serving all attendees. Now, I know I've laid out a lot of information on this, and this is already on top of many new considerations that are needed for in-person events. Look at all this as an opportunity, though. We have new tools that presenters and attendees are already familiar with, and some of those that they've come to expect. To get the most out of all of this, start the conversation early with your AV provider. This makes the process easier on everybody. Ask them to be part of the start of the site selection process. They can help you qualify the space, and more importantly, check that bandwidth that I keep talking about. We have provided some tools and resources for you on the conference website. Additionally, that information can be found on our website at avchicago.com/hybrid. Please feel free to reach out to me personally or to anyone at AV Chicago if you have any questions or you need guidance. Tim, thank you so much for having me here, and I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thanks, Andrew. You did a great job. I appreciate it. How about a big virtual round of applause for Andrew at home? There we go. If you're watching this on May 25th and have any more questions, Andrew will be around until 2 p.m. to answer them. If you're watching this after May 25th on Expo, you can see the questions and answers that were posted today in the feed on this page, but you will not be able to ask questions. So before I let you get back to Q&A, please join us at 11 a.m. tomorrow for a great educational session entitled Overcoming the Hurdles of Hybrid Events from the Organizer's Perspective. Finally, I look forward to seeing you on June 8th at Navy Pier's Aon Grand Ballroom for the Hospitality and Tourism Summit Trade Show. Thanks again for coming. Now please go ahead and submit any last-minute questions you have for Andrew. Have a great day.